All right. So this is our agency site administrator meeting. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is sort of a new meeting that we are trying out and that we want to test out with the community. So let's get into what we'll be talking about today. Now, we're going to talk about who this meeting is intended for. Then we'll hop into talking a little bit about data quality in terms of what we're planning, some of the tools that you can already use at your agency to measure data quality, and also plans that we are currently in the process of developing for updating the data quality plan and actually implementing it in our community. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the policies and procedures that I alluded to a little bit in our previous COC update that we had last month. Then I want to talk a little bit about the HMIS committee and where we are with that, and sort of do a call to action for folks. And we'll end off today with reviewing some of the tools that were in the system. And one thing I want to note is that for the tools, we are actually, so Gwen will go through the process of showing you where they are available, how you can find them. But then we're going to switch gears and turn off recording because we don't want any client information recorded or anything of that sort. So I believe that everyone here is an HMIS user or part of an organization that uses HMIS. So we're going to be showing some client data. We're not going to be recording it. We're not going to be posting it. So again, we're going to show you how to get there. And then we're going to turn the recording off and move forward with showing you more in-depth tools. So just be aware that probably the last 20 minutes or so won't be recorded and freely available. So it might be good to take particular notes there if you want to, show your staffers explicitly how to perform some of the things that we're going to be showing you. All right, so what is the purpose of this meeting? And who is it for? Well, this meeting is really for any HMIS user. This is an open session. Anyone that is part of the HMIS collaborative, part of the HMIS pool, is able to join this meeting so that they can get updates. They can be aware of the different changes that are going to be occurring in the system, workflow updates and tool reviews, etc. But really what we want to try to do is to begin to cultivate the pool of agency site administrators. So the agency site administrators, the ASAs, it was a role originally designated in our original policies and procedures. So if you look back on some of the documentation that your organization might have signed years ago, this was originally a role that was supposed to be filled and maintained, and effectively this person sort of is a formal point of contact between agencies and CHIP, specifically around HMIS matters. So this was, a lot of you are in this meeting because you're sort of effectively filling this role already, but we're going to start explicitly sort of we're going to be talking through this in a more explicit way, and discussing and sort of really refining this role and making the role clear a little more. So if you've been the point person for data, the point person for pulling reports out of HMIS or cleaning up data in HMIS, this is really going to be a meeting that you want to try to attend or at least view later down the line on a monthly basis. And if you're just a general HMIS user who does data entry, adds case notes, but doesn't really do much more than that, thank you for coming. And we're still happy to have you, but this may not be the full. You may not need to necessarily come to this meeting, but still, if you want to come through, please come through. So when we talk about the ASA role, there may be some re-signing, there may be some ways. You may have some questions about, like, how do we reactivate that? What is the implication of that? this is something that we're going to be figuring out and building out a protocol around, that's more refined and is just more standardized. Because right now it seems like this was a policy and a role that we had very much set aside time for, and that's fallen by the wayside. So we had to just pick it back up and rebuild that. And I anticipate that in our next monthly meeting, we'll have more of a process for how to sort of declare yourself as a ASA, or how to sort of know who should be the ASA at your particular agency. So just wait on more information about that. We'll be coming out with more of a protocol and more of a process in terms of what necessarily does that mean. So what are some of the things that we plan on discussing in this monthly series? So it's really designed to give you updates and create an open line of communication between you and us. So the typical meeting will talk through workflow and assessment changes. Next month's meeting is probably going to be a relatively important meeting because of the fact that data standards are going to be updated in October. So that's going to be impacting particularly youth projects. So, we'll be talking a little bit more in depth about data changes. So that's just an example of how we plan on discussing workflow and assessment changes. We'll talk about major system updates, again, using the data standards as an example of that. We'll do tool reviews and demonstrations of different tools that we have in the system, which is how we're going to try to end off today. And then any event or training opportunities. So, if there's a training on how to document chronicity that's open for everyone, we'll let you know about it. So these are sort of the 4 pillars in which we want to move forward with the meeting. And one thing that we want to try to recreate later down the line will be sort of a peer review session, a peer review model, or a peer input model. But for now, I think these are the 4 pillars that we'll be working off of as we think through how to better define that. So I want to start us off by talking about data quality. And specifically, we've been in the middle of the NOFA evaluation and several different processes. And in the community, it feels like there tends to be a conflation between the two. So I want to take the time to talk a little bit about the difference between data quality versus that of performance outcomes. So these are 2 different concepts, right? Data quality is related to completeness, timeliness, accuracy of data. This is something that should be monitored pretty frequently. When you enroll a client, you should be inputting a complete set of data, as accurate as it can be, and as close to when the event happened as possible. And it's a maintenance issue. It's about reviewing the information that you have in the system and making sure that it is accurate or that it is actually there. And this is relevant to all projects in HMIS. If you are a project that's totally privately funded, you don't take a cent of state and federal funds, being part of HMIS, you are required to adhere to the data quality standards, because your project, your data being entered, impacts our system as a whole still. When we run the LSA, when we run the items that we have to ultimately submit over to HUD, missing data from privately funded nonprofits or nonprofits that don't necessarily have a funder requirement still impact our scores, still impact our system performance. So this is a reminder that as part of the partnership agreements, part of the agreement of being part of HMIS, you are required, all agencies, all projects are required to adhere to a certain set of data quality. And this is something that we are really going to start building out processes for and monitoring processes for, so that we can ensure that across the board we have solid data quality for the entire system. And so in comparison, performance outcomes is more so looking at complex data calculations. It's not looking to see, is the name, gender, veteran status, is that all there? Performance outcomes is looking at additional context outside of just even that enrollment data. So when you look at performance outcomes, you're talking about uh, uh, housing stability that takes into consideration exits or sort of concurrent enrollments, or something like returns to homelessness, which looks at 2 years that previous, and then looks at where the client has been enrolled since those 2 years. So those are really complex. Those are very refined calculations that is not as straightforward. And and one thing to note is that data quality does not necessarily mean increased performance outcomes. Performance outcomes is more of a programmatic thing. It's linked with case management. It's linked with making, following up with your clients so that you can get there where they actually exited to. Um, so increasing your data completeness percentage, or fixing all your data quality issues, does not necessarily mean that you're going to have a higher performance outcomes. Because if you weren't able to connect clients with at exit with non-cash benefits, um, there's the data might be clean, but that's still you still weren't able to connect them with non-cash benefits. So it's more of a programmatic thing rather than being a issue regarding how the data was input. And so performance outcomes is something that is usually monitored a little on less of a frequent time frame, and it's something that would probably be reviewed quarterly, whereas data quality is something that should be reviewed on a monthly, or if you can, weekly basis, depending on the caseload of your case managers, etc. So I want to start to differentiate how we think of those two concepts. And so we have recently rolled out a system performance dashboard, and we have a recording that Gwen had actually done doing a deep dive of the system performance dashboard. And one thing that I want to mention is that we have a data completeness for the entire system, and then you can even go further than that and look at data completeness for your particular project. And the special part about that is that it doesn't require an HMIS access. It doesn't require an HMIS login. We have tools in HMIS to look at these things. We have tools in HMIS to see your data quality and data completeness and all of that. But your ED might not have it. Your board might not have it. And so you can use a system performance dashboard as a way to be able to communicate that to them. So here you go. There you could see our data completeness for the entire continuum is at 88%. And if I wanted to, I'm not going to right now, but if you wanted to look at your actual kind of own percentages, you would click on one of these buttons right here. So they're listed out by project type, and each of these is its own individual project type. So again, because this is being recorded, I don't want to sort of click on it and show anyone's particular data quality percentage. But just know that this is there for you to be able to use for those people at your organization that aren't necessarily HMIS users, but have a vested interest in sort of improving data completeness and getting higher rates for performance. So moving on from there, I want to go back here into our sheet, into our PowerPoint. Sorry, folks. So I mentioned the data quality plan because yes, thank you. Yeah, so if you want to take a look at Gwen's tip, what you can do is she mentioned the ability to press Control and click on multiple projects. So you would just press Control and click on whatever projects you wanted to actually look at. And again, I'm not going to do it for this sake, but Gwen has a Lunch and Learn that gives you a full tutorial on how to use this dashboard. Gwen, do you know if that is up yet? If we have a recording on our website yet? Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to see that, let us know and we'll send it out. And we can also put that in the HMIS news section as well as an additional resource if you want to take a look at it. Thanks a lot, Glenn. So I bring up the data quality session because now we have a significant amount of monitoring tools that at our disposal. We have internal HMIS data quality monitoring tools and an external facing monitoring tool. And I also want to mention that this dashboard gets updated monthly. So in HMIS, you might say like, wait, my data completeness is at 100%. I should be good. Why is it showing, 90%? That could be because of the fact that, we update that dashboard monthly, whereas HMIS is live data, so it'll show that reflected. We update the dashboards every 7th of the month. So one thing to note is that we are looking to implement our data quality plan. The data quality plan seemed to have been, So the last version of this data quality plan was created and approved in the spring of 2020. So it's already been live. And at this point, monitoring has not been activated. So part of the data quality plan was going to include site visits, was going to include technical assistance, was going to include a series of sort of follow-ups and processes that never got activated for the most part. And so our team has been looking through and thinking intentionally about how we're going to implement some of those portions of the plan. And we've also identified sections that just need to be updated for the purposes of having a better plan. So these are some of the things that we are looking to do as we look to update this data quality plan. So we want to refine the categories of data completeness. As it's written in the plan, there's a lot of overlapping elements, and that would cause kind of confusing data completeness percentages. So we're looking to separate those out in a more refined way that has no overlap, which right now it has overlap. We also want to develop better monitoring tools and processes and identify that in the plan itself so that we have sort of that reference of where things are coming from. Because in the plan, we reference the APR, we reference I think they literally say old data quality plan, old data quality tool. So those are things that we have to update and modernize so that it's reflecting that this data quality will be generated out of a report and the monitoring tools that we have in HMIS. We also want to develop better technical assistance. So what does our technical assistance look like? How will we communicate with you and identify what kind of needs you have? So that is something that we're working with in our team to think through how we can more effectively implement. So we, doing a one-on-one session is something that we want to, we don't want to necessarily always abide by, because that causes a lot of issues with scaling, with being able to communicate out to additional providers and sort of cross-train on a wider scale rather than just individual people at agencies. So we're trying to think through how we can best structure a technical assistance plan that is scalable and that can help the most people. And we're also going to be working with a work group to adjust some of the percentage thresholds. So the HMIS committee, as we'll be talking about in a little bit, we're going to be working with them to think through, should we reduce the amount of time for enrollment or percentages? So we're going to be looking at each category to think through, can we shore this up, or where does this number need to lie? And then we want to implement the year 2 benchmarks that were laid out in the plan and start that process going. So I want to quickly touch on policies and procedures. You all may be recognizing this, but we have a privacy policy, a partnership agreement, and an end user agreement. And all of these agreements lay out the type of data that's allowed to be shared in specific scenarios. It asserts the rights of privacy for our clients and ensures that all of us are doing our best to try to have secure practices in creating and using data that we have for folks. So Just continuing on in terms of what the current practices are, both Chip and yourselves have a responsibility to sort of talk to one another in terms of any breaches that may occur. So that means that outside entities that should not have access to the client track or to your client personally identifiable information, your client's personally identifiable information, um, we have to be able to communicate with each other so that this is ensured that uh, so that we know where our client's information is going to and how to address it, and so that we can close that breach. If an account needs to be locked or something of that sort, that we need to be able to know that. um, and then it also talks about identifiable client information only being able to be shared under certain circumstances. So, we're never going to sell data. We're never going to give, we're not going to give data to any random person or entity that asks if they're not an academic or nonprofit or governmental entity. Private entities can't necessarily ask for this information. And then also, it's our responsibility, both of us, to inform clients of their rights and of privacy protocols, and to not share HMIS accounts so that we know that the people that have access to client track, that have access to HMIS, have been properly vetted so that it's not just anyone coming into the system. I want to reiterate that accounts are one-to-one. We give you an account for you, not for you and the rest of the front line intake staff. It's ultimately tied to one person, not to many. And just as a quick reminder, clients, they have the right to get their access to their own HMIS data. Uh, if they refuse to, you know, if they have significant issues with having their information in HMIS, that doesn't mean that you can deny them access to services or anything. Instead, what you can kind of assure the client is that you'll put it restrict to org so that only your organization would be able to see them, not anyone else outside of your organization. And so, again, really quickly, because I want to give Gwen enough time to be able to talk through things, but in terms of what we're doing with the data that's in our system, we're using it to provide and coordinate services with clients. So if you've ever been to case conferencing, that's a protected thing under the privacy policy notice. It's also for functions related to payment. So you as an entity, as an organization, need to be able to, you know, go into drawdown, request funds as necessary, and you have to be able to enter the client into the system in order to be able to do so. It's also just to operate general functions. And when required by law, means that a law enforcement has to come to us with a warrant if they are looking for someone. And then, again, if there's serious threat to health and safety, whether the client wants to harm themselves or someone else, and that's been noted, in that case, we are able to disclose data if immediate bodily harm is suspected for either party, for either the client themselves or someone else. And then, of course, for academic research, we partner with the Public Policy Institute at Indiana University in order to do the point in time count. So we do partner with different academic institutions to perform some type of data analysis. And then we have, of course, government reporting obligations. CHIP needs to be able to submit what's called a longitudinal system analysis and a system performance metrics to the federal government. So we do so every year. And because of that, we need to be able to share that data. Now, why am I mentioning all this? I'm mentioning it because we're getting into a point where we're starting data integration projects, and those are just starting to get kicked underway. It's been something we've talked about for years, but now we have to start to think and modernize our policies to account for that reality. And so when you look at the documents, a lot of them haven't been updated for a long time. We have our one-page privacy notice that hasn't been updated for over 10 years. Our end user agreement hasn't been updated for almost 10 years itself. So a lot of these have a significant amount of updating and modernizing that have to occur. So this is mostly in response to the changing technological landscape. We have things like Google Sheets, right? I've seen this in practice where some agencies need to be able to coordinate which clients are there or quickly coordinate spreadsheets. So they'll input a client into their some client data into a Google Sheet that's at gmail.com account. And that's a free account. That's not, you should not have personally identifiable information in that account. If you just had HMIS IDs and nothing else, no demographics, great, that's an acceptable use. But if you're putting client names and client SSNs in a Google Sheet that is not an enterprise Google Sheet, meaning like that your organization paid for it or something of that sort, we need to be able to account for that and discourage that from happening. Because you don't know what Google or Dropbox or any free tool, if you're inputting client information into, you don't know what they're doing with that data. You don't know if they're scraping it or if they're able to sell it, nothing of that sort. So unless you're reviewing those terms of services with a fine-tooth comb, you can assume that if it's free, it's free for a reason. It's free because your data is the product. And if you have client information in there, that's even worse. Then we have, wanting to be able to give clients, is someone talking? Okay. So then we also want to be able to provide the client an ability to engage with HMIS. If they want to opt out of some of these data integration projects. So if they don't want to participate, we need to be able to give them that out, right? Try to think through what kind of client choice can we provide them. And then we also want to be able to give clients a better sense of how they can request their own HMIS data, kind of empower them to be able to do that. And we also need to update the policy so that we explicitly state what personally identifiable information is, because it's not well defined yet. So this brings us to talking about the HMIS committee. We want to start the process of engaging the HMIS committee once more. And I'm going to go ahead and actually put this link in our chat. And so the HMIS committee, some of the things that we're going to be addressing are going to be updating updating this suite of documents, the data quality plan, as well as the policies and procedures, and helping to provide input into that. So the committee, again, will cover the data quality plan updates, the privacy policy modernization and approval, policy updates for the entire system. We want to go into the process of refining COC roles and expectations. So, it's been probably a decade since we looked at what a agency site administrator does. So what do they do? What is their responsibility? What support should they have at an organization? So starting to talk through some of those things, and then a review of mass data projects so that we have more oversight and buy-in from you all, so that you know what we're doing with data and you know where we're trying to head and lead the COC to. So with that having been said, I want to pass it over to Gwen. And Gwen, like I had mentioned, if you could show folks where to find these first, and then before you start to actually run them, that's when I'll stop recording. Does that sound good? Quick post-meeting note, we had a little bit of trouble with our recording, so I'm going to go ahead and take over and show you quickly how you can get to some of the tools that we had developed in the system. So we're going to go ahead and show you the tools, but we're going to show you where to find them, but unfortunately we cannot show you any data or how to run them for the most part. really one of the issues that we have is privacy, and we want to ensure that our clients' information is as private as possible. So for this public recording, we will just show you how to get to the area, not necessarily run the tools themselves. So here we are starting off on the home workspace, and if you look in our sidebar, most of you will have the My Client Track section open. And if you hover over Performance Monitoring, you'll see several different options. And one of the main options that we're going to be getting started with is Program Evaluation. Now, Program Evaluation is really dedicated more so to projects that are funded by the Continuum of Care, those that are permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. And really, if you are a project that is a permanent supportive housing project or a rapid rehousing project, for the most part, you're going to be using this tool as a way to be able to see what your potential NOFA score would be. So it's really a good way to understand when the NOFA process comes around where you're going to land at. And so in that application, you may assume if you wanted to see what your NOFA scores would have been the year prior, you would go ahead and actually enter the date range. And this date range is open at whatever point, at whatever given point. It is not only for, a quarter or a month. You could run it from whatever time frame you want. So it's a really good practice to sort of get in the habit of running this report so you are on top of your data. And the additional button right down there is the filter by button. So program type will run all projects that are listed in the dropdown that I just clicked. So you can see that, we had permanent supportive housing, etc. But what you really want to run off is the program section, and you'll select the type of program, your program type here. So here, let's say I want to run for my permanent supportive housing. And now an option will appear for all the projects that are listed as permanent supportive housing. And I'll just choose a random one here. Let's see. There we go. And so what I can do from there is to click on search. And you'll notice on the lower right-hand side, there's a little icon that seems to be loading. This is actually what will be occurring in the system. One thing you want to know is that this will fail the first time. You'll see a warning on the upper right-hand side of the screen saying that the page was not able to load or there was an issue running the form. That is totally fine. That's actually what we're expecting. We're working with our vendor to try to address it, but the data and the calculations that are occurring take some time to load. So there you go. You can see it right there. All you had to do to address this is click on search one more time. Effectively, this is just saying like, we didn't have enough time to load this data, so we stopped the process. Well, that data is still there. You're just going to click on search one more time, and it'll continue loading from where it last left off. And so in the end, you might end up clicking that button clicking on search about 2 to 3 times. Now I'm going to go ahead and navigate away from here because again, I do not want to review any particular client data because this will show us real client information. So another section that I want to talk about is the data quality section. To begin with, let's start off with a performance summary. So when you hover over performance summary, you now have these several different options: street outreach, shelter summary, rapid rehousing summary, and prevention summary. Essentially, this is very similar to what the program evaluation was running, except it gives you more dynamic numbers, more concrete numbers, whereas the performance evaluation is more about percentages. And so again, it's very similar to the performance evaluation tool where you can designate your time range and select the program that you need. Now we're going to come over to data quality. And again, it's very similar. You have a date range that you can adapt. If you need more information about the columns that will appear in the form, you can expand and click that drop down next to column information and see what we mean when we talk about prior living situation or living situation history. All descriptions about what we are referring to are right there. And again, with the date range, you can run this on whatever date range that you want. What I'd recommend is probably on a monthly basis to do a review and audit of all of the data quality issues that you may have in your program. So right below that, we have our program name.
And this is, again, you just select whatever programs that are applicable to you, that you have access to. And right below that, we have two little checkboxes. Now, it's important to note that you don't necessarily want to check off these checkboxes all the time. These will filter so that it only shows your clients that you are either assigned as a case manager for, or that whose records you had created, whose enrollments you had created. So if you're a program manager or a program director and you're trying to get a sense of your data quality, if you check these off, you will not see your full data quality. You only see the pieces of data quality that you had touched. So again, if you're a program director and you want to review your entire program's data quality, leave those unchecked. So at this point, you would just click on search, and it would appear for you, but we are going to skip that. Now, the next data quality tool that I want to talk about is the data quality summary. And for now, the data quality summary is a quick percentage showing you the data completeness of your program. Now, one thing I want to mention is that this is something that we're planning on building out. We are planning on adding additional elements to this so that it falls more in line with our data quality plan that we have as a continuum. But as you'll be able to see, it'll spit out a quick result for us, a quick percentage of how much data we have complete, and then you would use the data quality detail tool in order to find the additional information. And the data quality detail tool, once you're able to see it, it really does have a lot of great information. It shows you what data is missing and what data is there. And so you'll use the data quality summary and detail reports in conjunction with one another. Now, coming up here to our current enrollments, I want to talk really quickly about housing statuses and documents collected. So housing statuses, again, you can select your program, but housing status is especially pertinent to any PSH or rapid rehousing project in that it will show you literally where your clients are last left off when it comes to their next step in housing. So you can document when they enrolled, when they applied for the unit, when they were accepted for the unit, when their eligibility was verified, when they have an upcoming housing move-in date, and when they actually moved in. So it's a great report. Now, the second report I want to show you is the document check. And document check, again, is most applicable to actually all projects. So in the system, we sort of have to ensure that we have full documentation for our clients, and document check is the way to do that. And this report shows you what documents your clients will have. So it'll show whether they have their ID, pay stubs, their benefits cards, Medicare card, things of that nature. So this is a great tool if you want to build up your client's documentation so that they can move that much quicker through the housing process. And again, what you'll really click on is the program name for the most part. That's what you're going to be basing this report off of. And so that just about wraps it up. Again, I encourage you all to attend one of our agency site administrators meetings. We have it occur on the second Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. The next one will be on September 8th at 11 a.m. So we hope you can join us.